recording. All right. What we've looked at so far are the various phyla of animals without backbone. So that includes your porifera, your arthropoda, the mollusca, the cnidaria. So we're looking now at the last phylum we haven't looked at yet that includes everything else. But we're all vertebrates are under one phylum called the chordata. The chordata. So an ancestral deuterostome, which means that the blastopore became the anus and not the mouth, developed into the sea stars. So the last thing that we looked at, the sea stars. But there's some progressions in the chordates. Progressions such as the advent of I know you probably can't see this, but I'll underline it. I wasn't able to make this screen larger, but advent of such features as a notochord, a brain, a head area, and vertebral column and jaws. So these are all progressions along the line of your more ancient chordata to your more recent chordata. So the most ancient chordata are the unichordates. They're also known as tunicates, and we'll talk about those in a sec. But they only have like 4 features in the larval stage, not in the adult stage, interestingly. And then with the advent of cephalization, or having the nervous system concentrated in the head end, and a rudimentary brain, you get your lancelets. But lancelets are chordates, but they also are not vertebrates. So not until the head develops and the vertebral column do we have the vertebrates. From the vertebrates, we get a mineralized skeleton, which leads us to osteichthyes, which are our bony fishes. And the advent of legs brings us to tetrapods, and amniotes is the last development to bring us to the more modern mammals. So the phylum Chordata is classified such. They're segmented animals with 4 very distinctive features: a stiff notochord, a dorsal hollow nerve cord, pharyngeal slits that are behind the mouth, and a muscular post-anal tail. So this is the anatomy of a chordate. This is sort of just a generalized form. The notochord is a long, flexible rod. It provides skeletal support. Yes. In vertebrates, it becomes a jointed skeleton, the notochord. The other feature is a dorsal hollow nerve cord. The dorsal hollow nerve cord. So that develops from ectoderm, and it develops into the central nervous system. So I should write that down somewhere. Central nervous system. And the notochord develops into a skeletal system eventually. The pharyngeal slits are such that they allow water to enter the mouth and come out the slits and pass over the gills. So the water doesn't have to be brought in and spat back out the mouth again. Yeah, so that is for gas exchange. And you're probably saying to yourself, well, Maria, I don't have pharyngeal slits. How could I be a chordate? Are you thinking that? Well, you can, and you did. So when you were a very small embryo, you did have pharyngeal slits, but they disappear with the development of the human. The mammal, indeed, does not have pharyngeal slits. And the other feature is a post-anal tail. The very simplest chordates are tunicates and lancelets. And with the tunicate, which is a marine animal, it's also known as a sea squirt. And it has a water, I'm not sure if the water goes in the top or the side. If it goes in the top, goes out the side. So it operates a little bit like a sponge, but it is not a sponge, it's a tunicate, because the larval stage of this animal has all of the features of a chordate, but only in the larval stage. And it's interesting that this organism has a gene called the Manx gene. And if that gene is mutated, it doesn't grow the tail. And that is the same gene that cats have. There's cats that are born without a tail, and that gene is mutated in the cat so that you get tailless cats. So that's very simple, the tunicate. The lancelet is also a simple animal. In the adult stage, it has all the features of a chordate, the notochord, the hollow nerve cord, the pharyngeal slits, and the post-anal tail. And it just it sits in sand and it comes out to grab small particles of food out of the water. It's a little bit like a suspension feeder. So it traps particles with its pharyngeal slits, and that's how it manages to get food. The food goes into its digestive tract. Yeah, so you can see where the segmentation is, particularly here in these segments, the somites. So lancelets used to be called, I don't think they're called that anymore though, Amphioxus. You might know of them as Amphioxus. So they're definitely the most simple chordate that has all of the features of a chordate as the adult form. So you're not a craniate yet until you have this feature. So this feature, which is unique to craniates or organisms that have a distinct head, that the neural crest, which are cells that appear in the dorsal margins of the neural tube, and they migrate to distant parts of the embryo, and they become part of the nervous system and also parts of a jaw, craniates. So they give rise to some of the bones and the cartilage of the skull. So take a look at these vertebrates and make some generalizations about them. Like, how can you recognize them as vertebrates? Or even just what kind of features do they all seem to have in common? So think about that for a moment. What features do they have in common? There's about, by the way, about 62,000 vertebrates. And that's what we're going to be looking at now, the vertebrates. Sorry. $62,000 living species. There's way more species that have gone extinct. But at the moment, as far as we know, there's about 62,000 vertebrate species. Do you recognize any of them? What do they all have? What do they all have? Sorry?
Heads? Yeah.
Heads. totally, they have very distinctive heads. And what features do they have in their heads?
The mouth, eyes.
Mouth, eyes, ears, their senses. So they have specialized senses in their head, the vertebrates. Because just like a lot of the invertebrates as well, the head end of the animal comes into contact with the environment first. So that's where the brain should be. The brain should be at the head end of the animal so that it can interpret its environment immediately. Is that a food or is that a predator? Yeah, so eyes and ears. So fishes, modern fishes, fishes refers to species, like numbers of different species. We say fishes. Fish is plural for any given group of fish. A group of fish is plural. A number of fishes would be different species of fish. Yeah, it's just a moot point. There's about 31,000 species. They're the earliest vertebrates. Some of them are jawless, so the very approximately 31,000 species. So you recognize a fish as soon as you see it. You'd recognize a clownfish, flying trunkfish, a yellowjack tuna. What gives it away? What for you says, oh, yeah, this is a fish and not something else? They're very diverse. They're very numerous. What gives them away? So what, for example, do they have as appendages? They have fins. So we're going to call them a finned. Do they exist outside of water? No, right? So they're aquatic. They are a vertebrate. You can't always tell that from the outside, but we know that they're vertebrates. And they have gills. So a finned aquatic vertebrate with gills. That would be a good description of a fish. So if they didn't have a vertebrate, well, they would be any kind of invertebrate, I guess. If they weren't aquatic, they might be a tadpole or some other land-dwelling organism. If they didn't have fins, they'd be salamanders, something like that, even if they lived in the water. If they had no gills and they lived in the water, they're probably a mammal or a bird. So, yeah, there's a huge variety of fishes. Yeah, lingcod, different kinds of cod, pufferfish, shark. This is a whale shark. Yeah, so a finned aquatic vertebrate with gills. Interestingly, so that the transition here would be to vertebrae. But not all of them have jaws, interestingly. So there's really three groups of fishes. The agnatha are the jawless fish, and they came first. Cartilaginous fish and bony fishes are later developments. So let's look at the agnatha, the jawless fish. There's really only two groups of jawless fish. There are the myxini, and those are your hagfish, the hagfish. Have you heard of hagfish before? They're quite remarkable. You know, they're almost everywhere, the jawless fishes. The jawless fishes are craniates, however. because they have a distinct head with a developed brain. They have the complex sense organs are in their head. Yeah, so they're organs for taste and for sight and for smell. There's approximately 67 species of hagfish. They're scavengers. They're very widespread, and they have an enormous amount of mucus that they exude from their bodies so they can slip away from predators. So they're very porous. They have slime glands beneath their skin, and they exude quite a lot of slime. Fishermen don't like to get them in with their catches of fish because they basically slime everything in the net. They produce so much slime. The skeleton of the hagfish is cartilage. And they're found everywhere. They don't have a properly developed vertebral column though. And they don't have paired fins either. They just have extensions of their body that are kind of like fins, but they're along the length of their body. They feed with these magnificently ugly mouths. They're stupendously ugly mouths. They eat things from the bottom like polychaete worms. They suck up food from the bottom of the ocean. They're found almost everywhere, except where are they not found? They're not found, I think, in the Arctic or the Antarctic. There's some place that they're not found. I don't remember where that is, but they're found in incredibly deep places. So in order to investigate the deepest parts of the ocean, which are like 11 kilometers deep, like the Marianas Trench, for example. So we didn't have underwater vehicles that could go that deep. So traps were lowered that had weights on the bottom and buoys on the top, but the weights were heavier. So the weights would pull the trap down to the deep depths, and then the weights would disintegrate over time so that they would release and the trap would rise to the surface with the balloons. And they found hagfish. They found hagfish that deep in the ocean. So they're able to withstand the enormous pressure of being at such a great depth, which is quite remarkable, really. Yeah, so they're agnatha, or jawless fishes. And if you ever see eel skin wallets, apparently, they're often made of hagfish skin. The other jawless fish is a lamprey. Lampreys have holes along the side of their bodies that allow them to exchange gases with the water. They have also a truly remarkably ugly looking mouth. And they, not all of them, but some of them are parasites on larger fish. So these are the lampreys. And there are about 40 species or so of lamprey. Yeah. They have a brain case. Sorry? They have a brain case, but also an incomplete kind of vertebral column. And they don't have paired appendages. So no paired appendages. Just like the hagfish. So that's more recent development. So lampreys have been quite devastating in the Great Lakes of Canada because they've come into the Great Lakes like one by one after channels have been built. for boats, they're often in bilge water of the boats, and they're released, and they are parasites of lake trout, and they tend to be quite devastating. So they've tried to get rid of them by various methods, and they're quite difficult to get rid of. They have an odd kind of migration in that the lamprey young, or the lamprey migrate up the rivers to breed. They have eggs, the eggs hatch, and the larvae swim downstream. So they thought, oh, well, we can just build a wall at the end of the stream, and that will take care of the problem. That has large enough or small enough mesh that they can't get through. But because they have those sucker-like mouths, they could just make their way over the wall. So that really did not work. But they did come up with a lampricide, so a kind of a chemical that kills only lampreys. And they also lack bone. So just like hagfish and lamprey lack bone. So no paired appendages, no bone, incomplete kind of vertebrae. So those are the agnathans. The gnathostomes are jawed fish. So all of the rest of the fish that we're talking about are jawed. They have jaws, like the chondrichthyes. So the chondrichthyes is a jawed fish, the skeleton of which is cartilage, although the ancestor of the chondrichthyes are thought to have had a bony skeleton, and the cartilaginous skeleton is something that developed later on. So they include sharks, they include skates and rays, and also an odd fish called a ghost shark. So they're sharks, skates, rays, and a new one that I hadn't heard of before. Well, two actually that I hadn't heard of before, sawfishes. And the other one is chimera, also known as ghost sharks. I've never actually seen those. But one thing that you might notice, what do these jawed fishes also have? They have a jaw, which the agnathans do not have. Now, what do they also have? What kind of fins? So you can see it here most readily. Two fins, those are pectoral fins, two anal fins. They have paired fins. They have paired fins. So that is a more recent development, to have paired fins. This clade arose, it's thought, about 370 million years ago. And the interesting thing about the sharks is that their body plan really hasn't changed in that much time. Because why? Sharks are top of the food chain. They're amazing predators. They can sense the environment. And they're really, really well adapted for their lifestyle. Most of them are carnivores. They don't all chew and bite. Some of them are filter feeders. There are different methods of reproduction in sharks. So I'm going to give you a couple of words now you might not have heard before. One is ovoviviparous or ovoviviparous. So the fertilized egg stays in the mother's body stays in the female uterus. And after hatching, they swim out fully formed. So some sharks exhibit that kind of reproduction. Some of them are oviparous. Oviparous, and that means they lay eggs that hatch outside of the mother's body. Yeah, but some of them are viviparous. Don't do that. I'll write up here. Viviparous, and that is the young develop inside the mother's body. And these lead to live births. So this is an example of a live birth. Some are very recognizable. The great white shark, for example. One odd thing about sharks is that they have ever-growing teeth. Just a second, sorry. I'm stuck there for some reason. 1 second. Okay, play. Sorry about that. Something's happening to my pen. It's always something with technology, isn't there? There's always something going on. Well, this is a great white shark, and its teeth are such that they're ever being replaced. They're not locked into the jaw, rather they're suspended by ligaments, and they have rows of teeth. So it turns out that most of the fossils from fishes on the ocean floor are shark's teeth. Yeah, they're quite common. Now there's different kinds of sharks, the gray nurse shark, the leopard shark, the great white. And these are toothed sharks. Other sharks are not toothed. This is the whale shark, and it just simply opens its mouth, glides through the water, and filter feeds right out of the water. They're an enormous shark. They're really quite large.
Do we have any sharks off the coast of BC here?
We do, yeah. We have a few different kinds of sharks. We have a salmon shark. We have a dogfish, which is a kind of shark. We have the six-gilled shark, which is really large, and it lives quite low in the ocean. Yeah, so we do. Yeah, the dogfish are about this big, I guess. This big. Yeah. So they're not huge, but they are predators. Yeah, so they're a toothed shark. The six-gill shark is also a toothed shark. Yeah. That's a whale shark. They have amazing senses. So in the there we go. Nope. some reason I can't write with my pen. Maybe it's just loose. Ah, it's just loose. For crying out loud. By the end of this course, this will be a piece of cake. So the neat thing about sharks is that they have many senses. One is known as electroreceptor. So they're in the rostral area of the shark and what are known as ampullae of Lorenzi. And they are full of oil. So oil. They can detect electrical activity from a few feet away. So they can detect prey that might be hidden in the sand, for example. They can even detect just the breathing of the prey by their electrical signal. They have a lateral line. Most fishes have a lateral line, and that is a sensory organ to detect water pressure. They have an excellent sense of smell, like it's amazing. They could, in a pool, say they could smell like one molecule of a tuna, for example. So they're very, very well developed sensory systems. There's some very unusual sharks. So this is the mouth of a cookie cutter shark. And its method of predating is really odd. It clamps onto prey and then it twists itself like a corkscrew and it takes out a piece of the prey. And it doesn't necessarily kill them. It's called a cookie cutter shark. So from beneath, if you looked underneath the cookie cutter shark, so it has a little area here, a dark patch, that resembles a smaller fish. And it's thought to be that's how it lures its prey. Then it turns around. So this is the prey. It could be a seal. Turns around and it clamps on. Very unusual shark. So the sharks. The sharks are cartilaginous. They don't have a bony skeleton. They don't have a swim bladder. And they don't have an operculum that covers their gills. So bony fishes are different. Bony fishes are more mobile. They have operculi, that's right here, that covers their gills and it moves water over their gills so they don't have to take water in through their mouth. They can just use that for digestion. And they have a buoyant swim bladder, that's here. And yeah, so those are the three major features that distinguish the bony fishes called osteichthyes from the cartilaginous fishes. There's a really large variety of bony fishes. They've really expanded into most parts of the ocean. Bony fish, osteichthyes. And there's three major classes: ray-finned fishes, lobe-finned fishes, and lungfishes. Although some people class these together. Depends who you talk to. But the ray-finned fishes, you recognize them. They're your trout, all those recognizable fishes that you see. The ones that are less recognizable are lobe-finned and lungfishes. So lobe-finned fishes are like the coelacanth, which is only found off Madagascar, and the lungfish, which is found in Australia. So the lungfish is a bit different in that it can breathe out of the air. Yeah, so it has a modified swim bladder that kind of acts like a lung, which is very interesting. And the coelacanth has lobed fins that are positioned more or less under their body. So there's this kind of question, what types of fishes might amphibians have evolved from? So an amphibian, in order to walk on land, would have to have limbs underneath its body. But also, to be on land, you have to breathe air. You have to breathe air. So is it the lungfish or the coelacanth, the lobe-finned fish that gave rise to vertebrates that could actually walk on land. So some of the recognizable fishes, the salmon. So salmon are very common off of our coast. There's 5 species of Pacific salmon, and they migrate like a lot of fishes migrate. This type of migration is known as anadromous. So they spend their lives at sea feeding and getting large, and then they return in rivers to breed. Yeah, so that's very common. So from here, for example, here's Vancouver, and the fishes here go up to the Alaskan Gyre, where there's loads of food and they get big. And interestingly, they can find their way back to the exact place where they were born in the stream that they came from. Yeah. Other fishes like the tuna, they're tropical species. They travel to temperate waters to feed, and they go halfway around the world each year. These are the spawning grounds of the tuna. Some fishes are not anadromous, they're catadromous. I'll write that a bit larger, catadromous. They breed at sea and migrate to fresh water to grow. Yeah, so that includes the eels, 16 species of freshwater eels. They're very interesting. They spawn and they die in the Sargasso Sea. This is the Sargasso Sea here off of the Gulf of Mexico. And they migrate from all different parts of the world, from North America, from South America, from Asia, from Europe. They all breed there, and then the larvae swim back. They swim back to where they came from. And that is a long distance. Migration is a really interesting aspect of fishes and fish ecology. Good, those are our fishes. Why do fish school? And don't say because it makes them smarter. That's a standing joke about why fish school. Why do you think fish school?
Safety in numbers?
Sure, yeah, safety in numbers, totally, yeah. So this school, for example, that might look like one large fish to a predator. Exactly. And they move with remarkable speed. And some of them might get taken, but they're probably closely related, a lot of them. So it doesn't really matter so much that some of them get taken. Their genes survive and they still go on to the next generation. Yeah, exactly. They might be more likely to find food in a large group. Probably one of the most important aspects is to mate. So it's easier to find mates if you exist as a community, as a large school. Some other oddballs, this is a real oddball, the anglerfish. It's a bony fish. It's adapted for the deep sea. There's food and mates are quite scarce there. So this, for example, is a lure that lights up. It's bioluminescent. It luminesces because it's dark. It's dark down there, but it attracts fish to it that way and gobbles them up with its enormous teeth. But the oddest thing about the anglerfish, I think this is pretty bizarre, is the males are parasitic. So the male, which is quite a bit smaller, latches onto the female and deposits sperm, but they never leave. So the male gets attached to the female just starts growing a membranous layer over the male. Eventually the female provides the male with nutrition, and basically the male just becomes a generator of sperm. Yeah. Oh, this one I wanted to show you because a lot of fishes have gill rakers, and they can swim through the water, also filter feeding. Some have these really interesting relationships with other fishes. So this large fish here is a grouper, and this small one It's probably a wrasse. And they're cleaner fish, so they clean the teeth of the larger fish or clean the insides, or sometimes they clean the gills. And so it's a mutual relationship because both of them benefit. The wrasse or the cleaner fish gets food, and the large fish gets cleaned from its parasites. Some even have male pregnancy. It's not really male pregnancy. The female deposits the eggs in the male's pouch, and the male then grows a membrane around the eggs, and that protects them from the environment. Okay, I'm going to stop there for a moment